Throw the ball, let the games commence. From the silent to the pitch, feel the suspense. Tactics, passion, the fans in a trance. We're here to discuss, give every team a chance. Strap in tight, let the whistle blow. For every win or loss, we'll let you know. This is the All Sports Podcast, feel the thrill. From every tackle, every shot, we got the skill. In the world of football, we're taking the stage. So plug in your headphones, turn the page.
Yo, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to the NFL segment of the All Sports Podcast. My name is Alejandro Rodriguez, and welcome to Episode 3, Part 2. Today, we're going to be talking about three new teams who played amazing games this past Sunday. I will actually be highlighting the other games that were played, just so that I can touch base on every team. So starting off, we did have the Eagles playing the Saints. Eagles won 15-12. Jalen Hurts threw for 311 yards with one interception, while Saquon Barkley had two running touchdowns, totaling out to 147 yards. The Dolphins took on the Seahawks, with the Seahawks coming out triumphant and remaining undefeated, 24-3. Geno Smith had one touchdown, totaling for 289 yards on the day, while DK Metcalf had 104 yards on the day with one touchdown. The Ravens played a very close game with the Dallas Cowboys, with the Ravens pulling out on top 28-25. Dak Prescott threw for 379 yards total with two touchdowns, while Derrick Henry for Baltimore had 151 yards on the day with two touchdowns. Let's head over to the Rams and 49ers games. The Rams did win by 3, 27-24, with Brock Purdy totaling out to 292 yards on the day with three touchdowns, while Jerome Jennings had 175 yards with three touchdowns on the day as well. Chiefs took on the Falcons and came out on top, remaining undefeated, 22-17. Kirk Cousins, 230 yards with one touchdown, and Rashad Rice with 110 yards and one touchdown. The Green Bay Packers took on the Titans, beating them 30-14. Will Levis totaled out to 260 yards with two touchdowns, while DeAndre Hopkins had 73 yards on the day with one touchdown. Bears took on the Colts, with the Colts winning 21-16. Caleb Williams threw for 363 yards on the day with two touchdowns, and Jonathan Taylor totaled out to 110 yards on the day with two touchdowns. Chargers faced the Steelers, with the Steelers coming out on top and remaining undefeated, 20-10. Justin Fields threw for 245 yards with one touchdown, while Najee Harris had 70 yards on the day. Broncos took on the Buccaneers, with the Broncos winning 26-7. Bo Nix threw for 216 yards, while Sutton had 68 yards on the day. And finally, Lions took down the Arizona Cardinals 20-13, with Kyler Murray throwing for 207 yards on the day with one touchdown, while Montgomery had 105 yards on the day with one touchdown, as well as Amon-Ra St. Brown with 75 yards on the day and one touchdown. So hopefully I got to your team, and these are the teams that I'm going to be focusing on for today's episode. First off, we're going to start with the Carolina Panthers taking on the Las Vegas Raiders. Panthers came out on top 36-22, with Andy Dalton giving the jolt that Carolina needed so badly in this win. Threw for 319 yards with three touchdowns, as the Panthers won their first game of the season, again with 36-22 over the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, with the benching of Bryce Young, the Panthers called upon Andy Dalton to give them that spark that they need. A lot of speculation has gone on in the past week or so in regards to Bryce Young, whether or not he could potentially be a right fit for the team. I do believe that's incredibly early to talk about, since he is in his second year. He is a former number one overall pick. I am of the impression that veteran quarterbacks should always take on the younger quarterbacks and take them under their wings and show them the ropes, which I do believe Andy Dalton will do if given the opportunity, if he hasn't already.
So watching Bryce Young get
benched, but however, watching Andy Dalton take the field, a little bit of a refreshing thing to see. Andy Dalton at one point in his career with Cincinnati was known as the Red Rifle in his prime. So watching him basically throw 26 completions out of 37 passes and becoming the first NFL quarterback this season to post 300 plus yards with 3 touchdowns as a performance. It's absolutely insane watching how much these veteran quarterbacks are able to turn back the clock. I believe on the year, Dalton has thrown maybe about 1,000 plus yards with 10 touchdowns in, I believe, his first 4 career starts against the Raiders. I could be wrong. I will get that answer for you all a little bit later on. But watching this game, man, is just insane. The Raiders did not have Max Crosby. He did get injured in last week's game against the Ravens. With the Raiders coming off a win against the Ravens in week 2, it was very difficult to watch a team who has built their reputation upon solid defense lose to these types of play schemes that were basically being run by the Panthers offensive coordinator. Andy Dalton is Andy Dalton, man. It's insane. Watching him play, basically playing his heart out just to make sure that he can, will this team into the win column. It is truly great to see, but watching the Las Vegas Raiders basically fold under the pressure of not having their star, defensive player was a little bit disheartening to watch. Chuba Hubbard on the day had 114 rushing yards, and that man was basically making the Las Vegas Raiders defense look like child's play. Deontay Johnson as well as Adam Thielen both had touchdowns on this Las Vegas Raiders defense, with Deontay Johnson totaling out to 122 yards on the day, with 40 yards on the day for Thielen. Now, in regards of Las Vegas's own offense, Gardner Minshew did have 214 yards on the day with 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Jacob E. Myers did have 1 touchdown as well, totaling out to 62 yards on the day, while Trey Tucker also had 1 touchdown and led the yards in receiving with 96. Watching a game like this unfold when for the past couple of years you've only watched how much of a defensive presence the Las Vegas Raiders has been, especially with the rise of Max Crosby, watching them basically unfold like they don't have a reputation was a little bit awkward, to say the least. Andy Dalton, even though in the past everybody who has watched Andy Dalton knows how he plays when he's on the money, watching him pretty much dismantle this young team, it was great for the Carolina fans who were watching the game, but also big question mark coming out, because I'm not sure that the Vegas Raiders were kind of worried as how well Andy Dalton was going to do. Again, this is back to the ideology that quote unquote older players can't play as well, with Dalton being 36 and all. But this just goes to show you, Andy Dalton can throw with the best of them. I personally thought that this game was incredibly exciting to watch, especially with the fact that by halftime, the Panthers were up big. And, the great thing was that Las Vegas had a late fourth quarter comeback, and we'll see how they go going into week 4. Both are 1-2 now, with Carolina getting their first win today. And it's going to be very interesting watching this team continue to grow. And it's also going to be very interesting to watch to see how Bryce Young, handles himself and grows as a quarterback, possibly watching Andy Dalton. I do think there will be a point in the season where Bryce Young will be able to come back and play. I just feel that right now Carolina just wants to get, some solid footing in the standings before they give the reins back to that young man. So Raiders fans, what do we think? I know we lost Max Crosby last week against the Ravens, and, after losing today against the Carolina Panthers, how do we feel? It's going to be very interesting to watch you guys continue. I do believe that Gardner Minshew should be your starting quarterback. There has been speculation with the fact that the head coach is possibly considering a change in quarterback style. But what do we think? Hit us up on the X, NFL on X _. Again, that's NFL on X _. And Carolina Panther fans, how are we feeling? Andy Dalton now has won 2 games. Not 2 games, I'm so sorry. Has now played 2 weeks in a row, but has now won your team's first game of the season. How do we feel about Andy Dalton? Are we still a little bit hung up with the fact that Bryce Young was benched last week? Do we believe that we'll be able to grow Bryce Young with the help of Andy Dalton running the show for the time being? Do you think he'll get the opportunity to run it back and be QB number 1? Please definitely let us know. I am very intrigued to see everybody's views and thoughts about that. So we're going to hop into the next game. Next game being the overly hyped, overly anticipated game of the Houston Texans against the Minnesota Vikings, which had a very unexplainable result. A lot of people going into week 3 thought that this was going to be the game of the week, with how hot the Houston Texans have been over the past 2 weeks, playing up against the still undefeated Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings took this game 34-7, a blowout to some other standards, but very, very weird defensive playing from Houston. For Minnesota, we'll start with them first. Aaron Jones rushed for 19 completion yards with 102 total on the day, caught 5 passes for 46 yards for the Vikings, and was basically the man of the hour for Minnesota. Sam Darnold went 17 for 28, totaling out to 181 yards without a turnover. And while Darnold did leave the game to get his left knee checked out after he was hit by former defensive end Danielle Hunter, he did come back and he did play to the roar of the crowd. Whenever you see a quarterback or a player just in general, but more strategically a quarterback go down with an injury like that, you always have to end up holding your breath because you always want them to make sure that they're okay. But the fact that he was able to run back on the field was a great thing to watch. On the other side of the ball for Houston, C.J. Stroud did throw for 215 yards on the day, totaling out to a 20 of 31 completion. This was the first time in 10 starts that he had been picked off. He was picked off twice in the game, which is very unorthodox for the type of caliber player that he is. However, things do happen. Nico Collins, who has been the NFL's leading receiver entering week 3, basically totaling out to 252 yards in the first 2 games, basically was a non-factor, having only 4 receptions for 86 yards on the day, thanks to some late paddling from the defense. His 34-yard catch that he did have in the third down set up the only touchdown that Houston had on the day in the third quarter. Stephon Diggs did lead the Texans with 10 catches for 94 yards on the day. This is the first time that he has played in Minnesota since he left the Vikings 4 years ago in 2020. So watching him kind of have that little bit of a moment since this was his first game back, a little bit nice to see. It would have been a lot better to watch him get a lot more targets, but the Minnesota defense was just absolutely smothering them the entire game. So Minnesota, now continuing their undefeated streak, is in a very, very interesting predicament. Sam Darnold, who unfortunately a couple years ago was written off due to the system that he was playing in, has now been showing huge potential with this Minnesota offense. And watching him pair up with Justin Jefferson and Aaron Jones is very dynamic with how they play with each other. Justin Jefferson, like I mentioned last week, or if I didn't, I apologize, in my opinion, is the best wide receiver in the NFL. So watching Justin Jefferson basically see much of a rejuvenation with the quarterback that he's now been given, just watching him just going out there pretty much effortlessly and, playing football, the game he loves, it's a great thing to see because you always want great players to have the proper tools around them to win. And I think Justin Jefferson now is settling down into a nice groove with the fact that he feels like he may have a great opportunity in Sam Darnold. And obviously he was very excited when J.J. McCarthy was drafted by the Vikings. He was very, devastated to hear about the injury that happened to J.J. McCarthy, which did put him out for the year. But having a veteran quarterback in Sam Darnold is and has been showing Justin Jefferson what nuances and how it feels like to have a nice quarterback come in and basically lead you guys to win. There's only so much position players can do. The quarterback is the most important position due to the fact that their strategic instincts need to kick in and create some plays. But that's just on the throwing side of the ball. Watching players like Aaron Jones, who basically is a monster in the running game, watching him basically dismember these past 3 weeks of defenses, it's just great to see. Aaron Jones is such a great running back. I can't say it enough. So it was great for Minnesota. Now I'm going to hop into the Houston Texans. Houston Texans, like I said last week, you guys probably have the most must-see offense on paper, and for the past 2 weeks have shown it in the NFL. CJ Stroud, my choice for the number 1 overall pick a couple of years ago. Very unorthodox with how he played today. He did get a lot of smothering from the Minnesota defense, which did force him to throw a couple of very questionable passes, hence why he had the 2 interceptions on the day. But with the team not having that same success that they've had in the past 2 weeks, the question now remains, are teams' defenses, starting to pick holes through the Texans' offense? Are they now understanding that the Houston Texans may be vulnerable in certain aspects? Because watching Nico Collins basically become a non-factor when he has basically led the NFL in receiving yards for the past 2 weeks was very unorthodox, especially for a player of Nico Collins' caliber. Also, the same thing for Stephon Diggs. Did Stephon Diggs feel like he could have done more? Which, some would say, obviously, he'll beat himself up this week going into next week. But, his new stint with his new team has been a little bit lackluster. I don't think this is going to be a long-term issue. Stephon Diggs has always been, recordedly a great factor for most teams that he has played on. So watching this game not be the close game that I myself also had anticipated was a little bit underwhelming for, the side of the Houston Texans. Watching the Minnesota Vikings pretty much go out on a tear, basically in the first quarter as well as the fourth quarter. It was just great to watch in regards of Minnesota football. Houston Texans, I know this might be a humbling moment, but take today's game and really look back at the tapes when you guys are going into week 4 and really see where your offensive scheme was kind of exploited by the Minnesota defense, and change what you need to change so that you can start becoming the team that everybody is expecting you all to be this season. You guys did great week 1 and 2, and now it's time to get back on the horse, do your thing, and get back to playing winning football. So fans, what do we think? Texans fans, I know you guys have been very excited with the new addition of Stephon Diggs. How do we feel about week 3? I know this is, like I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, a very humbling experience. Do we feel as though our offensive schemes need to be more closely looked at? Do we feel as though our defensive schemes need to be looked at a little bit more? How do we feel about CJ Stroud? I know it's only week 3 and it's very early into the NFL season, but with the benchings of former number 1 overall pick Bryce Young, do you feel as though he could potentially be losing his grip? Personally, I don't think so at all. I do feel as though CJ Stroud has been phenomenal. But what do we think? Texans fans, definitely let me know in the X. Again, NFL on X _. And Vikings fans, you are 3-0. You are one of the very few unbeaten teams in the NFL after week 3. I believe the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Kansas City Chiefs are the other 2 teams. If I did miss one, I apologize. How are we feeling? Do we like Sam Darnold? Are we going to ride or die behind him? How are we feeling about Justin Jefferson's play over the past 3 weeks? What do we think about Aaron Jones? Aaron Jones did leave Green Bay. He now is a Minnesota Viking. And how do we think about his play for right now? Leave your comments and questions on the X or in the comments down below. I would love to hear what you think. Alrighty, let's head over to the third game of part 2 that I will be speaking about. And that is going to be the Cleveland Browns against the New York Giants. Where you at, Giants fans? Where are you? Let me hear you in the social media space. Giants, you did win today. Very happy to see it. 21-15. You basically dominated the first half with 1 touchdown in the first quarter and then 2 touchdowns in the second. Daniel Jones. Ooh, Daniel Jones. My friends have had mixed feelings about you since you were drafted to the team. And today, you did your thing. 236 yards, 2 touchdowns, basically throwing up quite possibly some of the greatest catches I've seen out of a quarterback of your caliber. Malik Neighbors was anything but normal in this game against the Browns. He actually was one of the Giants' bright spots through the past 2 games. And he did shine again today with 8 catches, 78 yards in total, including a insane end zone catch that basically tiptoed in for his first touchdown of the year. At 21 years old, he became the youngest wide receiver in NFL history to have 2 touchdown receptions. That is incredible. To have that type of accolade coming into the league, regardless of what team that you play for, is such a great thing to experience, because you're watching this type of player who, in the combine, everybody was talking great things about him. In college, everybody was talking great things about him. And when you have the opportunity to unretire a number from a legend and have the opportunity to play wearing that number, it is truly a great thing to watch. Now, on the defensive end, the Giants' defense literally did their job from start to finish. They sacked Deshaun Watson 8 times, as the Browns literally had their second poorest performance at home in 3 weeks, and a lot more major injuries did pile up. For example, all-pro defensive end Myles Garrett may have potentially aggravated injuries to his foot that he'd been playing on since last week. He is, at the making of this recording, is set to have an MRI yesterday, which is Monday. And a significant injury to Myles Garrett could potentially alter Cleveland's entire season. Deshaun Watson threw for 196 yards on the day with 2 passing touchdowns to Amari Cooper, who by himself had 86 total yards for the day. You know, watching the Browns basically go down in this manner, it's a little bit weird to watch, to so to speak. You went scoreless in the second and third quarter, and then lit up for 1 touchdown, both to Amari Cooper in the first quarter and in the second quarter. Fourth quarter. And losing out on Myles Garrett, who has been a defensive anchor throughout his entire career, that must be disheartening. Watching one of your best defensive players potentially re-aggravating an injury that had occurred to him last week. And him being the player that he is, obviously wanted to come out this week and play and get his team a much-needed win. And much needed, I'm using very loosely. We are very early into the NFL season. But on that side of the ball, losing someone as impactful as that could potentially be devastating in the long run. But on the Giants side, Daniel Jones was nearly perfect, completing 17 of 19 passes. At one point, throwing 12 passes in a row without any issues. So watching a team like the New York Giants, I do live in the tri-state area. MetLife Stadium is roughly 25 minutes from where I am. And, you know, the Giants have had unfortunate luck in the past couple of years. There was a very great time period where the New York Giants had Eli Manning, Victor Cruz, Odell Beckham Jr., and that was a very exciting time to watch the Giants. Since the departures of all of those players, the Giants have taken a hit throughout the past couple of seasons, or more than the past couple of seasons. So watching them play like they played today, with that tenacity, with that energy, it was great to see. It was great to see Daniel Jones be very forthcoming with, you know, his strategy as he has gotten older and has gotten better playing in this league. A lot of people will say that they still don't appreciate Daniel Jones, but at the end of the day, Daniel Jones is your quarterback, New York, so you may have to cut him a little bit of slack. Hopefully he continues the same type of play going into week 4. And yeah, watching, you know, an NFC Eastern rival do well, at the core of it is just like, you know, it's all right. They can be bad. But at the end of the day, you know, you have a lot of fans that are diehard Giants fans, and they just want to see their team win like any other team. So Giants fans, give your guy Daniel Jones the benefit of the doubt. Let's see how he does in the middle of the season. We can then have a much different conversation then. Let's hope not. And Cleveland, you paid all this money for Deshaun Watson, and he hasn't been contributing as a lot of people would have thought. Do you still have that faith in Deshaun Watson to take you guys eventually to the promised land? Do you feel as though there might be a change that needs to come soon? Let me know in X, NFL on X _. Again, that's NFL on X _. I'll be more than happy to answer all of your questions, and we can just talk shop about what we're feeling here. So everybody, that wraps up part 2 of week 3, in episode 3. Like I said, everybody, throughout the episode, leave your comments on the X, leave your comments down below. I'd love to hear where everyone's head is at. Next week, we are going to highlight 3 other teams going into week 4. I am going to be trying to stick to listing off all the winners of the weeks as they go by. That way I can hit everybody's team. If you want me to talk about your specific team, please leave your comments and suggestions again in the comments down below or on Twitter. Definitely reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to listen to all comments, questions, and thoughts. Again, my name is Alejandro Rodriguez. This is part 2 of episode 3, talking about week 3, and I will see you all next week.